to Hebrews chapter 11 if you can. If you guys could open up your Bible apps to Hebrews chapter 11. And we're going to start in verse 23. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born, because they saw he was no ordinary child. Say, you're no ordinary child. Tell the person next to you, you're not ordinary. And they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded his disgrace for the sake of Christ as greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead towards his reward. You know that when you follow Jesus, you got a reward. I know that there was a lot of things that we walked away from, but one thing you did not walk away from was reward in Christ. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw who was invisible. By faith, he kept the Passover and the application of blood. I want to say that the application of blood is necessary in every season. It's necessary in every moment, every day. We need the application of blood in our life so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith, and we're going to end right here, by faith, the people passed through the Red Sea as on dry land, but the Egyptians tried to do so and they were drowned. I want you to tell your neighbor the title of my message here this morning. I want you to say, refuse not to be mega. Tell your other neighbor until you believe it. Say, I refuse not to be mega. And you could be seated here this morning. I was a weird kid growing up, and I'll explain why right now. I remember, I don't remember, I heard a story, but I remember, you guys know when you guys were in, like, Halloween was like your moment growing up, like where you could dress up everything you wanted to be? Well, I took that on beyond Halloween, and I remember, my mom just recently told me a story that they took me to Disneyland, and we would go every World Conference, we would go to Disneyland, right after, we would go for that weekend, and it was packed hot, and I would get sunburnt every time. And this one time we went, Princess Jasmine was walking. You guys know, where's my Disney fans at? All right. So Princess Jasmine was walking up, and my mom, she got us the autograph book. We were taking pictures. We waited in all the lines for all the Disney characters, and we saw Princess Jasmine. And my mom said, go say, we came to the line, right? Say hi, Daniel, say hi. I went, like a weird kid. My mom was embarrassed, but what was going on in that season of my life is I wanted to be Charizard. Pokemon, where's my Pokemon people at? No one, all right. Where's my mid-90s kids at? All right, there we go. I remember my mom would tell me that she was embarrassed because every time she would tell me to say hi to someone, I would growl and make weird sounds, and it's because I really thought I would be Charizard for that area of 5 to 7 in my life. I walked around thinking I was Charizard. I thought I was him. I thought I had the flame in the back of my tail. You guys know what I'm talking about. Everything inside, I refused to be Daniel. I wanted to be Charizard. When I look at the life of Moses and reading at the end, his life has already finished. He is in the Hall of Faith. But when you look at Moses in this time, it was a unique season in his life, and what is dynamic and unique is that when he was born, his parents saw from the start that he was not an ordinary child. There was something about Moses in birth that when they saw him as a young baby boy, they noticed that he wasn't going to be an ordinary person. And what was unique at that time is that his parents had something inside them that I think a lot of us, if we keep the principle in us, it'll take us a long way this year. And there was something called a refuse in their spirit. When they saw Moses and they heard about the Pharaoh's decree at that time, they said they were a Jewish family. And when they had that decree, there was a decree that went out to kill every firstborn male. And when they saw their child, they hid them from as long as they possibly could. And they knew they couldn't hide him any longer, so there was something inside them that said, I can't hide this boy anymore. Here's something on his life. There's something mega in his life, so I got to position him in a place where he could experience all that God had for him. And they did what they best could as parents, and to protect their child, they laid him there on the river, and he went down. So when he went down the river, Pharaoh's daughter came across this basket with the Jewish boy who was Moses inside them. And when they found Moses, Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace. He was the son of Pharaoh's daughter, and inside of him there was something that didn't sit right growing up in the palace of Egypt, and all that because there was something wired inside him that was mega. He wasn't an ordinary child growing up. He wasn't an ordinary person that was there in the palace. He grew up watching his people enslaved and building Pharaoh's palace and building Egypt, and something just did not settle well within him. I think it's important to recognize for you and I that when we look at ourselves and we look at what God's entrusted us, we can't see it as something normal. You can't see it as something small. God's entrusted you with big potential. God's entrusted you with big promise. God's entrusted you with big responsibility. God's put big promise inside you. And if you look at yourself small and you look at yourself through the lens of insecurity, you'll be able to minimize God's promise on your life. It was faith that they refused not to see mega in Moses. I love the word refuse because it's almost someone that's stubborn. And I want you guys to say a prayer for Jules because she has to deal with me and I'm pretty stubborn. Talk about where's my stubborn husband's at? Tell the truth. You know what I love about the word refuse is it's to show or express an unwillingness to do or to comply with. You know, I think what happens in life for a whole lot of us, and it happens on the journey in following God, it happens in society, it happens in day-to-day living, is that life has a way of trying to pull you down to accept the norm on your life, to accept average on our life, to accept something that is not big on your life, and you'll accept normal, you'll accept the status quo, you'll accept comfortability in your life. But when you refuse, you say, no, I refuse to comply with society's ways of living. I refuse to go with the molds that were put on my life. I refuse to go down that path. I don't care what my family's past was. I don't care what my past was personally. God has a new future for me, ahead of me. What I love about the word refuse is that you see in Hebrews 11, you see a whole book of men and women who refuse to live normal. You see through the hall of faith that there was a bunch of men and women who refused to live normal. It says in Hebrews 11:1 and also in verse 6, it says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. In verse 6, I love this one. It says, and without faith, it's impossible to please God because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. What I love about Moses' life is that when you see his life, you see that when there is faith, there is promise attached to it. You know that where there's faith, there's promises attached to it? Because you need faith attached to a promise to live for. If there was no promise on your life, there would be no reason to step out in faith. There would be no reason to have divine tension in your life. There would be no reason to step out beyond your comforts. You know, there's a lot of people, you guys know people like this, that when they walk around, they're like, man, this is just the way I am. This is the way I talk. If you don't like me, then you can get out of here. You can find a whole new person. I grew up like this. If you knew me, then this is how I am. This is how it's always been. It's how it is now, and it's how it will always be. You guys know what I'm talking about. If that's you and you're guilty, I'm praying for you. No, but there's a lot of moments where people accept and put things on their life that aren't necessary in their life. I just want to take a few moments to pull out a few principles from this passage of Scripture. And one is that we see that he refused to accept the norm. He refused to accept the norm. I love what it said in verse 24. It says, by faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Like I had said earlier, Moses grew up, and he grew up knowing that something wasn't normal. He grew up knowing that those weren't his birth parents. That wasn't his culture he grew up in. And something inside of him, it finally began to click. Like, this isn't the way I am supposed to live. I could either live in the palace, or I could follow what God's plan is for my life. Because listen, you know what? Sometimes the palace, it feels good. It is made in the palace. You know that there's some things in your life that are made if you just keep going down that road? And what I mean by that, it is comfortable. You'll get a nice paycheck. You will have the nice things in life. You'll have convenient things in your life. Sometimes you'll get some extraordinary moments. But nonetheless, you will never live a life of significance in that. But when you live a life following God, and you step out of palace living, Egyptian living, the living that you are accustomed to growing up in. When you follow God and you follow the vision and the promise on your life, you know what happens? Things begin to change. What did Moses do? He grew up, and there was a moment in his life where he saw his people being afflicted. He saw one of one of the slaves, they were being whipped and being beaten, and he took a moment and said, "This is it for me. This is it for me." And he took an action that isn't a good action, but nonetheless, it was taking an acknowledgement that this isn't the way I'm going to live no more. I'm not going to live in a place of comfort no more. I want to follow the calling on my life. I want to follow God's perfect will on my life. I want to follow God's perfect plan on my life. It might not be a plan of convenience. It might cause me to change and walk away from things that are unnecessary, but I want to follow God's perfect plan for my life. I'd rather live in God's perfect will than in God's permissive will. See, what is important about this passage of scripture is that what we can look at is that we can either cling to labels or we can cling to promise. You know what happens with labels is as you embrace them long enough, and they're not even things that people put on you, it's things you put on yourself. I think as much as sin kills believers, I think labels kill believers' potential a lot more. Because you see one sitting in the same place year after year, month after month, talking about what they will do. Oh, this is my year to do it. You know that labels will kill your potential? It will kill your ambition to follow the calling of God. It will kill your ambition to accomplish something mega and just be able to go to status quo. You could either cling to labels or you can cling to promise. What's something you've been clinging to in this season? Some of us, our goals for 2023 already went out the window. It started, we said we're going to go to the gym, but on January 1st, but guess what? That was on a Sunday. You're like, you know what? I'm going to start on Monday. Monday came, and Monday went. And look at us. I'm like, I'm embracing this potato bod. I'm going to do it. Potato bod. Straight potato sack season. You know what's a shame is when people allow labels of shame and complex and fear to hold them back from so long. I think some of us need to get the refuse back in our spirit. We need to get that attitude that I refuse to stay the same from last year. And I'm tired of talking about the same things in 2020 that were a struggle in my life. I'm tired of talking about what we missed out on. I want to talk about things that are ahead of me. I want to talk about things that are that we could accomplish. I wonder if I'm talking to some people this morning that have promise in them and they're saying, hey, I refuse to talk about what didn't happen and what happened last year. I want to look ahead to promise. I want to look ahead and talk about the big things that God wants to do. I don't want to complain about my job no more and how my boss is and all the challenges in my life. I want to talk about promise. You know what? Sometimes you could be draining to be around. I start to ask myself sometimes, am I draining to people? Am I just bleeding on people? Am I just letting out on people? Or am I talking promise on people? You want to know you're around the right people is when they talk about plans and not people. If you're with people, if you're around people and you just talk about people all day, I promise you'll just go through the same circle every year. We'll be talking at 2030 and having the same message having to be preached because you're in the cycle of nitpicking people's lives instead of talking about promise that could build something and build people and lift them higher. I'm talking about a mega people that know how to talk life and speak faith into people. Here's your word, stop gossiping. Your boss ain't that bad. You're blessed to have a job. Your cousin ain't that bad. I think there's sometimes that it's an attitude shift that happens inside of our lives. What I'm learning about being around our founder is that he doesn't ever talk about people. He talks about plans and promise. You know what that does? It unlocks mentality and big spirit in people. Some of us, we haven't unlocked certain areas because we keep talking about small things. You haven't unlocked promotion in your job because you keep talking about your job. Keep talking about people in your job. Hallelujah. What I love about this moment that we're reading with Moses is that when you see him, he was someone that refused to allow the labels that society put on him, that his family put on him, and that he put on himself. You see it in this moment when he left Egypt, is that he refused to take on the label of being taking on an identity that was not his, but also he had to take a moment where he had to take a personal acknowledgement where he had to refuse to be someone that was going to live in timidity. What makes me say that is that when you read about the story of Moses, is that when he was going through his journey, he not only had to leave Egypt, but he had to leave Egypt inside of him right where he was at. He had fear. He had a complex of speech impediment. It was hard for him to speak, and that was his reason why he couldn't step out and do what God had called him to do and be the leader that God was calling him to be, is that his complex was there holding him down. You know, he was speaking over limitations on his own life. You know what I love about being one of the first things I was hearing as we were looking to build a base here in Los Angeles and getting around our founders, you know, he's going to tell the team and tell all of us, he says, I need you to talk mega. I need you to walk like you're mega. I want you to think like you're mega before you already are mega. And eventually you'll grow into that thing. You got to start speaking life over areas in your life. You got to stop speaking death. You know what makes me say that? Proverbs chapter 18, it says the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. What are you eating? You eating life or are you eating death? I want to speak something big over the base here in Los Angeles, that the best days are ahead of us here in Los Angeles. There's going to be a day that we step in and there's not a seat in the auditorium. There's going to be a day we walk in and all walks of life are in this room. There's going to be team members trained and sent all over the world in this room. There's going to be a mega base that the world could look at here in this room. I want to tell you that you're not an ordinary man. You're not an ordinary family. Your child there in Next Gen is not ordinary. Your place in this ministry is not ordinary. Your family's not ordinary. Your gift is not ordinary. I wonder if I'm preaching to the right people that say, hey, I refuse to accept the norm. I want to be a mega leader. I want to be the man in my family. I want to be the woman in my family. We need some people in this room that refuse to accept the norms on our lives, but speak promise over us. You know, I love coming to church because there's always promise being spoken over us. I love being around leadership because there's promise spoken over my life, and we'll begin to eat the fruits of it, and you see it happening already. That's why we're going to Hollywood, because there was life spoken over us here. That's why we're able to do what we're doing all over the world, because the life's being spoken over us. Some of us got to change our vocabulary in this season. We're going to start speaking life over things in our life. Stop talking about what holds you back. Man, brother, it's a struggle. Secondly, is we got to refuse to cut corners. I like what it said in verse 25 to 26. It says, he chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin. He disregarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead towards his reward. You know what's significant is that he could have just stayed there in Egypt and had all the rewards of Egypt. He had all the wealth. When you think of Egypt, think of Moses. This guy had all the nice clothes. He had all the jewelry. He definitely had all the fire food for sure. This guy was eating fat over there. He was a made man right there. He was eating good right there. And he could have just simply chose to say, you know what, this is a good life right here. But when God does something in you, you realize that there's a process that God wants to take you through, and that process requires us not to cut corners in areas of our lives. See, what Moses made a decision to is not to live off coattails. He made a decision not to be known as Pharaoh's daughter, but to make his own name and be named Moses and be written in the Hall of Faith. Moses would not be written about if he was living off coattails. You know why? Because that means he would have always lived in shadows. He would have always lived in a place hidden and not a life not of significance. He refused to cut corners. What does it mean to cut corners? It means to just simply go the easy way. I think for us, naturally, we want to go the easy way. I'd rather not go somewhere difficult. Am I the only one? I think the quickest analogy for all of us with that is that we will always if we're hungry, we will go to the quickest thing. And we will compromise our taste values. Hey, I like nice food, but when I'm hungry, I'll eat anything. McDonald's looks like the best thing for sure. Oh, I'll eat chicken nuggets when I'm the hungriest, a spicy McChicken. Who am I preaching to this morning? Some of us, our taste values get compromised. We cut corners. But there's also areas in our lives that we can cut corners in, and we could just barely make things by and kind of just go through the flow of things and just cut corners on things and not experience the best of things. And I began to read, and something began to stick out to me when I was reading that is that cutting corners is the willingness to compromise excellence. We could say compromise mega for good enough. I'm refusing this year to live for something that's good enough. That just gets me by, that just gets me under the radar, that just doesn't get me any attention, but enough to just make it by, and nothing's challenged on my life. But I want to live a life where something mega is being birthed out of me, and everything I put my hands on, something being birthed out of it. I don't want to cut corners in my life. I want to work hard if I got to work hard. If I got to sacrifice, I'll invest into things. And I think sometimes we look at things, we say that's a sacrifice, instead of looking at things that's investment. I'm building something in my life. I'm setting things up for my future. I'm setting things up for those that come behind me. I'm setting things up for my children. I'm setting things up for my future. Sacrifice just sounds draining on things. Say, I'm investing in this thing. Some of us, giving still a sacrifice. You got to look at it like you're investing into this thing. There's some people here maybe in this room, you say, man, that was the Old Testament law. Can I tell you that they started talking about tithing before the law was in place? That was before the law. It was during the law, and it is after the law. Some of us, we got to stop cutting the corners of generosity. As we're stepping into Hollywood, you know what's going to stir up is some mega generosity. And you know what? That's going to be the thing that helps us get to new dimensions in the journey where you know what? The base will experience greater favor in it, but you'll experience greater favor in it. You want to hear a funny story on how I became a giver? All right, so this is I grew up in church. So I remember one time, it was this World Conference I got saved, and I went with like a couple $100 in my pocket. I was getting paid under the table at that time, so it would give me cash at the end of the week. So I would go, and when I went to World Conference, I remember throughout the whole week, I started giving. My parents were taking care of me, so I was good. So I just had my money. So by the end of the week, all that money was given away. It was gone. I got back, and there was a parking ticket I had to pay, or a car. I don't know what kind of ticket I had, but it was like 400-something bucks. I was like, dang it, this is tough. Mind you, I'm a baby Christian. I'll probably save for like 2 or 3, like 5 days maybe, 5 days most. And I'm like, man, this is tough. Is this what giving? Lord, help me, God. So then as I'm that next Friday comes, my boss gives me the envelope. I open the envelope. I got home, opened it, and I opened it. I'm like, hey, there's more money in this thing. So then I was like, man, I was still barely saved. So I'm like, should I tell my boss or? So I'm like, you know, cause I grew up around, my parents were believers since birth, so I had some conviction in my life. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to just tell my boss. And I told him, he's like, you know what? No, you just keep that. Just take it as an advance for your next paycheck. The next paycheck came, he still gave me this, like my normal pay. I was like, yo, this is good. I like giving. I'm going to do this more often. And that's talk about learning generosity for dummies right there for sure. Some of us got to get over the hump of cutting corners. You know that nothing mega is ever accomplished through cut corners? Nothing. You'll be able to go through certain seasons and you'll go at a slower pace because corners keep getting cut. I want to talk about a few corners that we can't cut in this season. One of us, we can't cut the corner of prayer. I love that we start years off as believers, and specifically here in Third Wave Los Angeles, with a time of prayer and fasting. You know why? I heard it like this, that when we work, but when we pray, God works. Some of us, you know, before these kind of years, sometimes you end a year and you start overcompensating and you're thinking you're working overly hard and you're not seeing the result of things. And I think it's because we were leaning more on self than on God. The things that we're stepping into, we cannot do on our own. We need God's hand on our life, God moving things so we can be sensitive to the way he's leading us. And at the end of the day, we need his power on our life. We need his touch on what we do. We need his touch on our gifting. We need his touch on our thinking. We need his touch on our ministry. We need his touch on our families. When we cut the corners of prayer, it's almost like the analogy. You've ever heard the one of the young man who went to chop trees against an old man? So let me tell you the story. I'll be very quick. The old man, they had a competition who can cut the most trees down in one day. So what the young man did, strong young man, began to hatch at these trees. He was going, and he looked back and he noticed the old man was working, and he was just in there sharpening his axe. So as he was watching him do that, he's thinking, this old man is a trip. Something's wrong with this guy. And he's just going to work. I can picture him. This guy must be shredded to just be chopping trees all day. If you give me an axe, I'll chop a quarter of a tree and I'm done for sure. I need a food break, all sorts of different breaks. I need 20 breaks. I might get a tree and a half in a whole day. So he looks back, and at the end of the day, he finally sees towards the end that he starts to chop, or in the middle of the day, he starts to chop. And by the time the end of the day came, the old man had chopped more trees down than the young man. And he began to ask him, how did you do that? He said, I just took time to sharpen my blade. You know that prayer and fasting sharpens your blade as a believer. Some of you've been praying for patience, but it's only when you fast that you unlock patience and you unlock a new mentality, you unlock a new spirit, you unlock a new thinking, you unlock a new thing within you. You can't cut the corners of prayer as we step into this new year. We shouldn't cut the corners of hard work. You know that anything worth accomplishing is going to take hard work? Hard work's like a cuss word sometimes. I think for a lot of us, we like to work hard, but only in certain areas, in certain things. We'll work hard in fantasy football. We'll work hard on situating our finances. We'll work hard on things that we think as pleasure for ourselves, but what about things that seem as purpose for us? Sometimes the hard work of answering late night phone calls, of spending time with people and taking time to disciple, put our hands on a person and spend time on them and invest into them and pick them up on. Sometimes those are hard work. Some of you get emotionally drained from it, and so do I, but can I tell you that when you have the first corner that you're not cutting a prayer, you know what happens? You're fueled every time you invest and impart into people. You're fueled every time after work you decide to go to LA Social. You are fueled every time you go to rehearsal when you've been working hard week after week and you just keep sowing the seed of hard work. I want to tell you that there's blessing in hard work. Whenever God called a man, you look in the Old Testament, you see people that were working. They were just doing their thing. They might have not known the significance of the hard work, but God brought out the significance in time. You know that sometimes the hardest battle is just to keep showing up? If you just keep showing up, there's blessing in just showing up. There's blessing of just getting in the room. There's blessing of just getting around people that are faith-filled and promise-filled, and they're going towards something big and mega. Third corner we can't cut. So we can't cut the corner of process. If I could have the music team come. When you honor God's process, he'll honor his promise. When you honor God's process that he's putting you through, he'll honor his promise. I think that's encouraging for some of us because it feels like some areas are a long process. I grew up watching parents believe for a long promise over my life. And when it seemed like it was the worst that I was putting them through, that's when God was honoring their faith to refuse the norms on my life. And what they went through was something called God's process. I'm learning as a young man, as a young minister, what it is about going through God's process. It was unique when Jules and I got married. I'm 27. We got married. I was 26. She was 25. And there was something unique that we began to face. She was facing some health challenges. And it was one of those things that I had no idea how to handle as a newly married man. And it was at the same time that we had moved to Amsterdam, Holland. And I began to feel the hand of God's process on my life when he was making me. And you got to go through moments where God makes you, and it doesn't feel good because it feels like God's hand is heavy on those moments. It feels heavy in those moments. And simultaneously, you still got to speak life over things. You still got to speak faith over things. You still got to believe in faith for a lot of things, for your personal life, for your marriage, for your ministry and everything you're doing. You still, in the midst of all that, still have to latch to promise. And all I was trying to do through that short season, it was trying to figure out what to do. There was nothing I could do in that moment. All I could do was pray and be alongside. At the same time, we had a challenge ahead of us of finding a UTC facility. And can I tell you that sometimes, I remember Pastor Ryan preaching about when he was talking, when people would ask him how's the building hunt going? When you guys finding a building, and that was before we found the last building we were in, he's like, oh, it's going good. We got potentials. I remember having those same talks with people every time I'd come down, when we were coming down from Holland. How's the UTC search going? It is great. All is well in Amsterdam, Holland. And during that time, you know what was going on? God was making me, because I was still having to take hold to the seed of promise. I had to refuse to allow a situation to pull me down to my level. But I had to let promise pull me to a higher level. Because I could have said, no, this isn't right that we're going through this thing. This isn't right that I'm going through a challenge and my wife's facing a challenge and we're going through this challenge together. But nonetheless, we were still pushing forward. You know what God did is he honored us in that process. He opened the doors for a facility that man said was an impossible timing situation. I don't know who I'm preaching to here this morning, but some of you have been facing some impossible situations, and you feel the hands of God's process on your life. And you know what the greatest temptation is? To give into convenience when you're going through challenge. Because it can seem like an honorable thing to exit God's process and use that as an excuse. It is easy to say it is convenient through challenge, through inconvenience, to say it's my time to set these things aside. But no, when you follow Jesus, can I tell you that when you keep everything in alignment, whether it is hard, it is going well, you are in a valley, it seems like everything around you is outside your control, can I tell you that is the time to lock in, anchor in on His process. It's not time to cut corners in that moment. It's time to anchor in. Put your head down. I'm going to surf through it. I'm going to pray through it. I'm going to give through it. I'm going to sow seeds of faith in it. You're believing for your children. Can I tell you, if you keep reaching up to people, God will honor you as you honor His process for your life. Lastly, we have to refuse not to see God make statements in our lives. I love what I read about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because you see people that refuse. Some of you got to refuse. Refuse not to see God's best on your life. Refuse not to be the man and the woman that God's making you to be. You're the leader that He's called you to be. You're the minister that God's called you to be. Don't ever see yourself down to your own level. You need to allow God's promise to pull you higher and lift your thinking higher and to latch to something bigger than life. It said lastly in Hebrews 29 that they saw the Red Seas and they walked through dry ground. You know what that is? That is a miracle from God and God alone. Some of you, this year, you're going to see miracles in your life that it is going to be God and God alone. But you know what? It's going to come from someone that refuses to give up on that. Don't get weary in what you're praying for and what you're sowing for. Don't get weary while you're serving. The example you're trying to be to people at your job, the example you're trying to be for your children, the example you're trying to be in the ministry. You got to keep serving. You got to refuse to get through comfort. You got to refuse to accept norms and accept average, and you got to allow God to pull you higher. Get around leaders that are going to pull you higher. Allow God's word to pull you higher. Allow prayer to pull you higher. What we're going to step into is going to be so big. It is that it demands so much of us that we can't cut these corners. For some of you this morning, it's going to be a decision you make to get that attitude back. Life had a way of draining that refuse. Some of you ended the year and there was a refuse, and then some things happened, and maybe there were some challenges that hit your life, and you've been to take time away from prayer, and you've been to just wake up and just go to work instead. You've been to take those moments, and it's been to take you away from your faith and take you away from the God who promised you. I want to tell you this morning, it's your time to get it back. It's time to get it back. It's time to get it back. I want you to touch your heart, say, I'm getting it back this morning. Touch your heart, say, I'm getting it back this morning. Tell your neighbor, I'm getting it back this morning. Tell your other neighbor, I'm getting it back this morning. I'm getting ready to see God make statements. Just like Moses saw a statement, the greatest miracle of the Old Testament, the seas parting, you're going to see the greatest miracles in your life this year. This year. No, you got to keep speaking and say, this is my year. I refuse not to be, say, I refuse. Someone, say, until you believe it, say, I refuse not to be mega. I refuse to cut corners. I refuse not to see God's best. If that's you this morning.
Hey, this is Brittany here, and we want to thank you for tuning in to Third Wave LA YouTube channel. We pray that this message has spoken to you, and what we want you to do right now is to make sure you like, subscribe, and share this link to someone that will also be impacted by this message. Also, if you want to stay up to date with what's taking place at Third Wave LA, make sure you subscribe to all of our social media platforms. This is Third Wave LA, where hope is found and purpose is lived out.